Welcome back to the First TV's live coverage of the Iowa caucus. We'll be here for the next hour. Grateful you're here. Grateful you're not listening to the lame stream. Who needs them? Here is the scene right now. Donald Trump was declared the winner of the Iowa caucus. We lamented a moment of this that the media called it so quickly while many of the caucus goers were still in the middle of their caucus. They haven't even voted yet, and they get an alert on their phone saying that Donald Trump is the winner. So that is kind of lame. But alas, he was the winner. There was no question about that. Now, the question was, as we talked to Sean Spicer, how much is he going to win by? Greatest margin of victory was 1988. Bob Dole beat Pat Buchanan by 21 points? 12 points, 12 points. And he had 41% of the total vote. Right now, Donald Trump has 52% of the total vote. So as Sean Spicer said, if he can stay above that 50%, then that's going to be a pretty crushing blow. And the other big story is Ron DeSantis right now is in second place. I want to go right to our wonderful guest. Tudor Dixon is here, host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, and David Marcus, wonderful columnist. Follow him on Twitter as well as Tudor. Both of you, thanks for being here. Tudor, I want to go to you first. So you won your primary running for governor of Michigan, and you should have won the entire race. We should be talking to the governor right now. Take us through the ups and downs and the highs and lows of running a campaign and an election night where things do go well for you and then things don't go well. How are these players feeling right now?
Yeah, watching these things is kind of like PTSD, right? You're watching it and you're like, oh gosh, I know how they're feeling right now. And especially I think for Ron DeSantis, I feel for him at the moment because he put a lot into Iowa. So let's be honest, he put the majority of his money into Iowa. He has the governor's endorsement. Iowa had to be a big win for him, or it had to be at least really big numbers. Being essentially tied with Nikki Haley right now is a real kick in the teeth for him. And so the question is, what does he do now? Does he continue on? Does he try to save face? I mean, at this point, I think most of the people in the country are going, this is a surprisingly gigantic win for Trump. If he holds over 50%, as you just said with those numbers, man, this is going to be record breaking. And, you know, Trump's not going to let that go.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't fall into a deep depression after losing. Spending all that money and doing all that work, and they did the 99 counties, they did the whole thing, and then you lose some. It's brutal. David, were you ever DeSantis curious these last year or so?
I don't really support any individual Republican candidates. I would happily vote for any of the people who ran. I did think DeSantis had a very good chance going back to January, even through the spring. Looking back on it now, though, I'm not sure that there's much that he could have done. I think the campaign had some missteps. I think it was way too online. I think the launch on Twitter was an absolute disaster. He allowed himself to be upstaged by Elon Musk and the platform. But I just ultimately, he's a fantastic governor with a CBS receipt of accomplishments. I think that this just wasn't his time because the GOP electorate, they want to give Trump another shot. And I'm not sure that anybody can really stand in the way of that at this point.
Yeah, much of this is timing. So what do you think he should do if you were advising his campaign, David?
I think he should drop out and endorse Trump. I mean, I wrote a column a week ago saying that he should do that even before the Iowa caucus. But in that, I had the caveat. I said, throw the Hail Mary pass if you want to. That pass is incomplete. It's fallen harmlessly to the ground. So I do think that he should drop out and endorse Trump because the Trump supporters still like him. He still has a very bright future in the GOP. And not for nothing, Trump wants to win New Hampshire. Trump's best chance to win New Hampshire, where Nikki Haley is close, is for DeSantis and Vivek to drop out because most of their support would go to Trump and he'd probably beat Haley in that situation.
Yeah. Tudor, we were talking with Josh Hammer a moment ago about the DeSantis campaign, and he said when he was running for governor in this last go, he had a lot of swag, and he just couldn't get it in Iowa and this whole campaign in general. Can you speak of that? I don't even know what you call it, but like what you need in a campaign, that it factor, and Nikki and DeSantis and Trump, and how they each had that or didn't.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of like this connection, this automatic connection with the audience. And once it was sort of exposed that he didn't have that, and I think that was a bit shocking because I think in Florida, people had seen him come out and do these press conferences and be really prepared and very sharp and kind of snap back at people. And that was what they were expecting on the campaign trail. And it was just like you said, the start came off rough, and then it was hard for him to connect. And that it factor, maybe you don't need that so much so if you don't have Trump on the ticket with you. But when you have Trump on the ticket with you, then you've got to compete at that high level. I mean, that is a very high bar.
Yeah. David, who is the Trump voter? I ask you this because there's going to be a lot of confusion moving forward with the media characterizing the Trump voter a certain way. Who do you think the Trump voter is?
It took me a long time to figure that out after 2016. And it really wasn't until in 2018, I was writing for The Federalist, and I just kind of drove across the country. And it wasn't really until I got into the middle of the country and started talking to people who lived very different lives than I was familiar with in Brooklyn, where I lived at the time. And what they really told me was that Trump seems to listen to them and understand their concerns. Now, I think Trump supporters would say that's what a good salesman does, right? Trump's detractors would say that's what a good con man does. You know, you can't con somebody if you don't know the mark. So whichever perspective you have on it, I think that's the secret, is that he really does listen to people and understand them. And that's very much appreciated in parts of the country that are not New York and Los Angeles.
So everyone I've talked to who spent serious amount of time on whether in the administration or as a reporter, we're going to talk with Alex Marlow, the Breitbart editor-in-chief, coming up next. He just did a 2-hour interview with him just like last week. And that's the number one thing people say about him, is he's an intent listener and genuinely asks questions to the person who's asking him questions. So he genuinely wants to know. And I think that goes back to even Art of the Deal days. He would talk about how before buying a property, he would go talk to the cab drivers and listen to them more than the consultants. So I think that's always been an element of his, even on a personal level. It's interesting that can connect even through the media or through the internet or whatever. Tudor, I'm going to throw that to you. Who's the Trump supporter?
You know, it is the person who feels like they've been forgotten. It is the person who feels like there hasn't been someone standing for them. And it's a lot of different people, but the Trump supporter in many cases is really just a Trump supporter. So you saw this in my race. You saw he came out and he endorsed me, but not all of the Trump supporters came out and voted for me. You saw this in Kentucky. He endorsed Daniel Cameron, but not all of the Trump supporters came out and voted for Daniel Cameron. They are very specific to Trump. They love him. They feel like that he has stood for them. He has fought for them. He has fought for the little guy. He has fought for the business owner. He has fought for the mom. Those people feel that he is there for him. It's something special. It's a relationship. And I have to tell you that my own experience with him, like what you were saying about him asking questions and talking, I mean, I just recently had a phone call with Donald Trump, and at the end of the phone call, he said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I know you lost your dad a year ago, but he'd be looking down on you proud." I mean, this was not prompted. He didn't know I was going to call him. Nobody put down a notebook and said, "Hey, this is who you're about to talk to." He just impromptu remembers what's happening in your life. That is pretty impressive. People recognize that in another person.
Yeah, it's very good. Donald Trump's going to get to the mic here in about 10 minutes as well, just for everyone watching now. Hang on for 10 minutes and we'll hear from Donald Trump himself. Gosh, that is very interesting. Someone on my radio show called in and said, "Don't confuse my vote for Trump as support for the Republican Party." So what is that, Tudor? What is that disconnect there? Why does that not hold over to the two?
Well, there's right now you're seeing disconnect in the Republican Party, because you do have a lot of the Trump voters who have come in and said, "Hey, we want this." And I think in a lot of cases, they've felt like he's worked outside of the system. And that to me is unfortunate, because I think he has worked really well inside of a system that works really well. And that's where I think Trump supporters need to look at the accomplishments that he was able to make by working with Congress, by negotiating. He is the great negotiator, right? The art of the deal. That's Donald Trump. But he did not break government. He worked within government. And so there is a little bit of a group out there that's like, "Hey, we just want him to go in there and change things." And he has made it clear, "I'm the great negotiator. I will go in there and fix things." And so you see that tug and pull in the Republican Party. We're trying to bring those folks together and say, "We want to work with you, all of you."
David, it's going to be quite a 10 months or so moving forward. What is your advice to the conservative on what their posture should be moving forward?
Well, I mean, look, there's going to have to be unity, right? I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be some consternation and hard feelings tonight and maybe for a week or so. That's another place where both Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump could help to put some of that to bed, the same way that Trump and Cruz were able to back in 2016. So obviously, that's going to be important. And I also think just really keeping a strong focus on Joe Biden's faults, right? Biden's going to run a Trump is a Nazi campaign, which is, of course, ridiculous, but will appeal to a certain number of people. Conservatives are going to have to play offense as well, whether that's Hunter Biden, whether that's the border. On all of these issues, it's got to be offense against Joe Biden and not a defensive posture in regard to Trump and his trials and the attacks against Trump. Because Biden, I mean, Biden's in bad shape.
Yeah, you'd think this would be an easy offense to run.
I mean,
the great Tudor Dixon, host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, and David Marcus, columnist, follow both on Twitter and their shows, etc. Both of you, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.